segment as well as the industry in general. And we're delighted to have two of the most respected players in the segment, CEO of Rebtel, Andreas, and CEO of Vonage, Marc. And we just talking backstage about the war stories of the iPhone launch and other stuff. And I'm sure we can have many more discussions around that in the future. But today we're going to talk about the OTT segment. So Marc, let me start with you. Vonage has been around for a long time, has seen the evolution of the communication services. At this point in time, how do you describe the OTT space as it relates to communications? And maybe briefly describe, what do you expect in the next 2 or 3 years?
I think we're at an inflection point. We've seen the popularity of over-the-top and consumer acceptance made possible by smartphone penetration, broadband availability, and access globally to a couple of operating systems. So people are very familiar with it. But I think you've got a broad array of value propositions that are kind of rethinking how they return the capital back to the folks who invested. So you've got a lot of free services in search of a business model. I think we're starting to just see in small and medium businesses, over the top is now starting to explode, and there's a place where there is real value to be created, where much of the core business is still on traditional telecommunications providers. I think there's a lot of conversation about what's going to happen in enterprise. So I think the chapter is probably, in a 10-chapter book, we're probably in chapter 3. Everybody's aware of it now, but I think there's much more to play out over the next few years. If I flash forward, I think we're going to see is tremendous compression on pricing. I think we continue to see large free communities. I think they're going to move. I think the stickiness of some of the large free communities that exist, whether they become federated with other communities or they shift to the next exciting change in how people are communicating, whether it be entertainment-enhanced messaging. Andreas was talking earlier about what we've seen with Instagram and Snapchat as innovations on something as simple as picture sharing. I think we're going to see more of the same over the next few years. But I think the real revenues are going to come perhaps more in the business segments than in consumer.
Andreas, you have been a veteran of the space, among the very few players who have been generating revenue north of $100 million, obviously much larger for Vonage. But since you have seen the revenue evolution for some time, what's your sense of the space and where the future revenues will come from? Is it going to come from scale, or is it going to come from new services?
I think, if you look at the space now, there are 7 or 8 services with around 200 million users, and there are new services being launched like Snapchat, which are also becoming viral. So the need for these communication services seem to be very, very apparent. And most individuals are using different ones for different services or different functions and features. The problem is the monetization. There's been $500 million pumped into these companies, and at some point you're going to need to see a return. And for me, it's really sort of, if you look at instant messaging 10 years back on the desktop, this is kind of the next step of that. Those companies are not generating a huge amount of value, but 250 million people in a social graph has a value, and if it can be put to good use within a home, a larger player that can monetize that through advertising or through stickiness or distribution, then there's an opportunity. But the chances are that some will get bought and the other ones will scale back and fulfill certain functions. But you're seeing huge amounts of innovation in actually what messaging, what communications actually does. And one of the most interesting things I'm seeing at the moment is actually packaging this technology and making it available for app developers, because it's a hygiene factor. Pretty much every single app in the App Store has a user case for having some form of communications in it. Makes it stickier, makes it a bit better, makes it more engaging. How can that be packaged and given out in an extraordinarily simple way to enhance a user experience that already exists? And I think that's where you can monetize.
So I heard two new things that might expand on the current horizons. One is looking at new segments, enterprise segment as probably a way to better monetization of these services or packaging of the services, and looking at developers as a channel to provide these services. Could you expand on probably maybe the SME segment first and then the larger enterprise do you think about those segments?
Sure. In fact, we announced just last week a definitive agreement to buy a company called Vocalocity, who is one of the fastest growers in the SMB space for cloud-based VoIP services. So it's a software as a service platform. They're growing faster than 8x8, and you've still got, for small and medium businesses with 1,000 or less employees, it's a $15 billion voice market. Only 15% of the market is in hosted VoIP at this point in time, growing at roughly 30% a year. And if you look at the three largest players, their total revenues are less than $500 million. Vocalocity is growing at 40%, and they provide a value proposition, which is 50% of the cost, much better feature set, monitoring, the ability for a small or medium business to sign up for service.
Is distribution directly to those SMBs?
It is. It's directly to the SMBs. 45% of distribution is digital, so SEO, SEM, web aggregators, referral network, VAR channel, and then outbound telesales and direct marketing. So you don't actually have full-time feet on the street.
US and or global?
So Vocalocity is primarily the US, expanding into Canada. But as part of our growth strategy, which is international expansion, we've announced going into Brazil. We've got partnerships in other countries as well. This platform will travel well outside of the US. And what we find is there's very low awareness still of small and medium businesses. And once they actually try a cloud-based service, particularly those that don't have IT staffs, the 60% of the small and medium business market that has 20 or less employees, they're looking for ways that they can actually customize their communications and use it in the business. There's a mobile component that goes along with it. They want it to be working on their iPad. They really want to have full-blown communications as they can control it for all their workforce across any broadband connected device. They want good broadband connectivity. They want to use software over the top. So we think that's where there's a great place to monetize some of the core capabilities that Vonage has built. We still think that there's plenty of room in the consumer space. It's very much the compression and stealing of market share for what I'll call overpriced services like international long distance. And Andreas' team has done a fantastic job in that space. Build a nice business on international long distance. It's been a place that we've been able to grow our business over the last couple of years as well. And I think you're going to see that more outside the U.S., where there are still oligopolistic pricing practices. But I think I agree with Andreas' assessment of what's going to happen likely with the large social communities of these 200 million plus user communities.
So I mean, there are not that many large players who can absorb these, and either they themselves might have an existing strategy or they've already acquired a player. So it seems like there are not that many avenues in terms of exit. So do you expect kind of a quick M&A in the next wave of M&A in the next 12 months or so on these players?
It seems like there's a little bit of a Mexican